I'm going to probably just go a bit quickly. I wanted to come back to this slide. I know what it feels like to be a deer on the 400 now, but I'm going to go back to this slide just to talk a bit about the application. And I'm going to go rather fast, so I need everybody just to take one hand like this and put another hand on your desk like this, and then I'll go through the whole demonstration. We're going to show some product. I'm not going to get too much into detail about the product, but the product is going to let me demonstrate and just point out areas of information. And then I'm going to tell you where they come from, and I'm going to leave it at that. And then we'll get into questions and things like that. Coming back to this slide, this is Jim's. We're going to look at an application that resides in this area, an interface to information, which can also be translated to one of the applications at the top. So a clinical user or a radiologist or a cardiologist or someone needing to get some information is who's going to be using this application. And this is a highly technical switch. You know, when I first started, I tried to see if I could convince everybody just to get sick in the same hospital so that we wouldn't need MPIs. That didn't pan out, and it didn't go over big with the government either. Probably a screensaver there. There we go. Some fireworks. First thing I launched the application. There we go. Got a fade in for you. Let's sign in. Yeah. Right. I didn't get to change all the names, but Dave McDougall is the fire chief of one of our friends at work. So we choose Mickey Mouse and other names like this, but I thought I'd come up with some of my relatives in this one and friends. Two things. I went into an area where I did a quick query, and then I brought this image up. I went through it rather quickly because at the end, a user should really, this should be the way it is. Sign in, they know who I am, they know what I like to view, what I'm responsible to view, not what sometimes they don't always like what they're responsible for, and automatically come up into an interface that makes sense. In this case, it's reviewing images. I'm a radiologist, and I've brought up a cath image, so I'm doing double duty. First off, we have a study form here that's just going to give us some information, and if we point out a couple things, or I will, within the patient name, patient sex, birth date, the study date, referring physician, and an area for comments. The patient name is coming from the hospital information system, generally with a radiology mix, and that hospital information system is in charge of that patient's information, and we want to get that from that system direct. No typing in and mistakes and things like that. So through the standards that Jim's talking about, or the integration tasks of taking standards that are not implemented or implemented but kind of different depending on the vendor that you go to, trying to sanitize that and bring that so that it all comes to one spot. The study date, the unique accession number. We talk a lot about trying to integrate data and MPIs and all this. Of course, when you have a patient or a study, you need to uniquely identify that, and you can't have a patient with 123 as the ID, and then another patient in an area that's connected to that system with 123. That will clash. So two patients suddenly share the same identifier, and potentially that could mix data. So a big part of sanitizing the data includes making sure that it's unique. The study data, which is also unique, the exam identifier, comes from the rest of the radiology information system. So what I'm demonstrating, although it's just some images, some data, it's data from a hospital information system, a radiology information system. The movie in the background that you'll see in a moment is from the modality or the acquisition station. This is where you may have known somebody who's gone for an exam, and it's in a cath. It's where they make a small incision and a catheter goes into the heart. And from the heart we put out some contrast, and we can then see the heart beating. So that would be a beating heart. The image itself is potentially 30 megabyte. In terms of size, if you've ever been in Microsoft Office and tried to open a really large file and it started to open and you went and got yourself a coffee and you came back later and you tried to page forward and then you went and got yourself another coffee and then you came back. The data that we have to deal with is of enormous size. If one run that they've done is 10 to 30 megabyte, they may be doing, well, they used to do 10, and that was pretty easy. And then they kind of played a trick on us, and now they may do 37 runs. So we have to be wary of that and watch when they're doing that to allow to display, archive, and move this data across networks and store it for an indefinite period of time. So we're looking at that visual information from the modality. Text information, visual information from multiple sources, bringing it together in a user interface that we hope makes sense for the person using it. We have to sit with doctors all the time and have them tell us, and then we move forward and come up and try and find interfaces that make sense. This type of interface, while making sense for someone like a radiologist, cardiologist, someone who's viewing images and may do surgery, doesn't necessarily make sense for a referring physician who may simply want to see the report. This doesn't mean anything to them. That's why I went to radiology, so they would give me a report so that I would know what's wrong with that. If I had to look at that, I'd be a radiologist. It's not my job. So completely different needs that we have to stay in tune to. If we can have the information from all these separate points and then bring it together in some sort of fashion that makes sense for what they need to do for that patient, that's where we're starting to become successful. So what you're seeing here is just an example, again, of a workstation for, say, a cardiologist or a radiologist, where we'll bring that information together so they can produce reports. Now, I'm viewing information, but you also need to add information. You need to do something. That's what they pay them for when they're reading and stuff. So it's a workstation as well to add annotations, to add text to images, to measure things, to create a report, to do a dictation. And to do that, we find that many, many times we end up needing as well, let's bring this one up, specialty images. So specialty kind of tools. It wasn't mine. Special kind of tools and things like that. A radiologist, although he can view images, sometimes he or she will need to less make subjective calls, so just look at the data and it is broken as opposed to writing down that it wasn't. Also need some more objective tools, measuring and things. So for a bit of flash, I thought I'd show some 3D technology. This is a CT exam. A CT exam is the thing that they lie down in, kind of like an MRI. Same thing, they lie down in that. But they lie down, and it's just going to go through and create slices of the body. What I did here, when you saw a little calculation at the beginning, was here are the slices that came from that acquisition, the modality station. We bring it into the workstation with the other information from the other systems, but allow them to create these on the fly. So we've taken all the stacks, all the slices, put them together, and then we've taken out this particular slice. So at the top corner up here, you're seeing views out of the body like this. We take them all, pile them up, and now in this one, we're now taking views like this out of that and representing them here. With the side one, we're going to cut the patient this way, not physically, pull out the image, and then put that on. And this allows a different kind of view to the data for the radiologist. It allows him to take a look at slices that weren't possible before. So I've not only taken slices like this or slices like this, I've now taken a slice. It's kind of like that. So before we'd have to go back in, reset the CT scanner, send the patient in again. It's a waste of resources, waste of time. Let's quickly get the slice together and take a look at what we need to progress with what we want to do for this patient. For fun, I'm going to load this. We're going to do a quick calculation. There we go. Of course, if we're going that far, we might as well go one step further And if the lights were out, it looks really good. What we're looking at now is that data brought together in a 3D image. The spine, just for reference. So we're not only providing integration, which is the basis of all this, but we have to provide other tools so that they can do their work to the data that we've integrated, and then they'll want to put this data out further. So even if they're creating the report, she might have reviewed the images, and she's going to be speaking with a radiologist or a specialist, a surgeon of some sort, and want this now to leave this system and become part of the report for distribution up into the EPR or the other areas within the hospital so that it's viewable. So they're creating information as well. And we want to distribute that as appropriate as they desire to who needs it and what's going to help them. So connecting things up is a huge thing. Technically, there's all sorts of issues. Jim went through his slide. And there'll be a quiz after we're done. Be ready for that. Do you all have pens? Okay. We're going to, I was kidding, just in case everyone thinks I'm serious. We want to connect everything up. It's the basis for everything in that the only reason why this particular radiologist, the only reason why she can do her work today in this fashion and quickly, a big part of radiology is let's read. I want to get through many exams in a day. I need to read very fast and get through my exams. Whereas before, you got light boxes. You've got people run into the film library to go get the film, get it out of the jacket, and it's the wrong film. Just the same way as most of us don't put the proper CD back in the right CD cover, it happens with film too. Except of those who do this all the time and wash their hands, we might be perfect and they might do it every time. But it happens. It slows down patient care. And it's a problem. So we want to improve that process, but also assist in a bit of workflow here. If we can get the data in of what the study is about, whom it's for, what were their previous exams, what is the information in the hospital information system, risk information system, patients and studies, respectively. There's insurance information in there as well, so we can do proper billing. This provides all the data that the next system needs to do their job for a radiologist to read the exam with the information they need to make a better diagnosis. The more information we have, the better our diagnosis is going to be. And then finally, move on to billing, putting out the report. The report goes off to the risk system. Who ordered the exam? Off to the referring physician. Without the data coming in, it can't trigger the next event. Without the data, the next event may happen, but it won't be as good as event. It won't have the proper content needed for that job potentially. And we might not get as far as we want or the best results we want. Just going over the time, I wanted to keep it a tiny bit more. I'm rushing as quick as I can just to make sure. Just going to exit out of here for one moment. We talked a bit about data integration, a lot about data integration, but you're looking at images, and that's just as complex sometimes as the text. Obviously a bit more complex because it's images and they may be more complex than text. We talked about images coming in and the difficulties presented with trying to integrate different systems. One vendor says they're HL7, and the other vendor says they can read HL7. When they come together, they find that they speak slightly different versions of HL7. It's the same standard, but it's not implemented in the same manner. Imaging is the same way. Although all the imaging is DICOM, it is not always uniformly implemented. Not everybody does it the same way. So in our case, we're not only challenged with providing a means to integrate different HIS, RIS, and text-based systems. We get the information from the modality, the acquisition station as well, and sometimes this is very different. There's very different ways to represent visual information or code it. And in that case, we have to have the ability to read that as well. So when we get the images, it's mixed with images and then also text data. DICOM, the standard of DICOM, is implemented to assist vendors to come together in a PACS world. Picture archiving and communication systems. Jim had mentioned that. That is a concept or a name put against something that is going to archive these images. I'm going to archive the images and possibly distribute them and act as the manager of those things. So there's difficulties within text and within imaging, and again, bringing that together in one interface that makes some sort of sense, while you allow the physician the tools to do their job. And something as simple as connecting things as you would think it would become simple becomes very complex very quickly because of these different standards. That's just a technical issue at that point. Throw in people, budgets, and things like that, politics. If you come to multiple sites, multiple institutions, it can be very difficult to have these types of projects become successful. So not only do you have to have knowledge of technical integrations, dependencies, cross-vendor compatibility and how to bring that together, you also have to have a sense of where you're placing it in. You can't just come up and place in integration systems and computer systems and expect everybody to be able to run with it and then be able to move. You have to have the proper training and acceptance as well. So bringing a system like this, I don't want to say integrate the people, but certainly if we have interfaces that make sense, we need to train them properly and allow them the proper opportunities to let us know whether or not they have the data that they require. So, to sum up in just a few minutes, the workstation that you've seen here showed a few different modalities or acquisition stations. We can see X-rays through here, nuclear medicine, MRs, any type of imaging. You're looking at a system that is bringing together the patient data, the radiology information system, the study data, the study images. So it's connecting one station or one application or one interface is connecting HIS systems, RIS systems, the PACS systems or picture and archive systems, as well as potentially any other number of interfaces that that site said was necessary to bring together the information they needed to do their job. Always a tough challenge. It seems to be moving along very well now that it's 2002. Yeah, I can go on.
Let me show you a couple more examples of different kinds of images.
Absolutely.
Orthopedics.
Let's go in and do a, where is my...
You have one way you can overlay the orthopedic device.
Absolutely. Oh, excellent. Yeah, I do have time for that. Go one step further with issues that we found. This is always a good story. We went out and developed this system, and we went and talked to radiologists, and they were very happy about going filmless. Very happy. We were very, very happy that they were happy until we ran into the orthopedic surgeon, and he wasn't very happy. The reason being, they were dependent on film, and we were going filmless, and that was an issue. They do pre-surgical planning. They have the ability, or they have the task of putting on a piece of film. This is specific with the doctors that are going to go in and cut away some bone, as an example, from the hip because it's arthritic and it's starting to fall apart in this area. They'll cut away the bone and put in a prosthesis, a metal implant. If you're going to do that, you better be sure that it's going to fit properly and fit well. The only way you can do that is by taking something that would be representative of the size of that implant that you're going to place in the bone, and then have an idea of the size of that and the bone. Is it going to fit? They use something of an acetate that's clear. On the acetate was a representation of the prosthesis. It's a CAD drawing on a see-through piece of paper, which allowed them to apply that up to the patient. And they don't make prosthesis this big, but film was smaller. They would put it up on the patient, and they can judge if it's going to fit. It's a bunch of them on a ring. It's a manual process, but it's a critical process. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do, is quickly change my license key. I wanted to explain this as well. It's one application. Depending on the license key, it behaves differently, but it's one application satisfying different, don't try and remember this piece, different disciplines. In this case, it was a radiology station. And now, it would be an orthopedic station. Marketing decision, but underneath it's one application satisfying cardiology, orthopedics, clinicians, any sort of image specialists, radiologists, quality control technicians who need to segment studies from a CT or separate study images to the proper studies. So if we're going to integrate everything, it made kind of sense to use the same application and the same tools while we're moving on through the enterprise. Not the real one. It's the only name I could think of at the time. There we go. Now, the full set of data looks like this. This is a pretty good indication of what the acetate looked like. This was the clear piece of paper with the drafting drawing on it. So we talked about text integration, image integration, and these types of things. But when we came to orthopedics, they said, this is what I want, holding the film and the acetate over top of one another. This then allowed them to get an idea or roll through the different sizes that they had of what's going to fit this patient and what is not going into surgery. It's their recipe for the surgery that they're setting up here. So this turned out to be more of an integration of CAD data, DICOM data, as well as the patient and study and other relevant data to this exam. It became a bit of an experiment in that manner. You never really know what you're going to run into. In cardiology, as we're now into there, we're finding the dependencies. Integration's quite different. Now, with radiology, it was images. It was certainly the RIS, the radiology, and certainly the hospital information systems. But also now, as Jim said, the challenges are with the hemodynamic, the procedural logs, other information that, well, maybe waveform, hemodynamic pressures, and also ECGs. But now we have a whole new world of information that we had to integrate. Orthopedics being another example that no matter which discipline you go in, there's always something new that you have to bring to the system. And then we have to distribute this later to the OR and then out to the referring physician to show them what we actually did. This is how the patient looked. This is what we planned. This is what I did. This is the results of the patient on the post-op. And then that goes out to the referring physician. So we've got quite a unique set of things that we always need to bring together. And it works very much like a drafting program.
Not only does it bring the digital representation of the film and the acetate slide, but you were saying a while ago, Steve, it actually improves pre-surgical planning. The result is somewhat better. We're
doing the studies now. Simply put before, a step I didn't do. Some people here may have certain x-ray or healthcare experience, as I can see. But the step that I avoided was recalibrating the study to an object of known size. In order for this to be more accurate, when we do an x-ray, let's say that's the x-ray and this is the film, as I walk away from here, the resulting image of me seems larger than it is. Much like x-ray, when the patient is away from the table, their anatomy ends up being a shadow larger than they actually are. So we need to recalibrate the study to objects of known size. It could be the implant that's already existing, if this is a revision, or an object of known size placed by the bone that we're interested in. We need that, and that's critical, so that then if we have the proper conditions, we can move ahead and do this type of planning. That allows for a bit more accuracy simply because we're now dealing with things that can be represented with more accuracy. So once you're looking at the x-ray and looking at the implant, you can zoom in and get as accurate as you want. The tools that they have available can't get as accurate to the imaging. So the net result is we're finding that the accuracy is improving over the acetate-based pre-surgical planning. And that allows for longer stability, longer life of that implant when it's in the hip, and net result, the patient's doing better off for that type of technology, we're assisted by the orthopedic surgeons and the physicians and told what to do so that the patient can end up doing better at the end of the day.